They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when your own family treats you like you're invisible until they need something from you? My mother cut me out of the most important day of her life, erased me like I never existed, replaced me with strangers who meant nothing to our family history. But when her new husband's mother needed life-saving surgery that only my husband's medical empire could provide, suddenly I became the most important person in their world. This is the story of how I learned that sometimes the family that claims they love you the most can hurt you the deepest, and how I finally found the strength to walk away from people who only saw my worth when they needed my resources. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I always thought my mother Linda and I had an unbreakable bond. Growing up in our modest house in Cedar Park, it was often just the two of us against the world. My father had left when I was 12, disappearing into a new life with a woman half his age, leaving behind a pile of debt and broken promises. My mother worked double shifts at the local diner to keep our lights on, and I became her confidant, her supporter, her partner in surviving the wreckage he'd left behind. Linda was fierce in those days, the kind of woman who could stretch $1 until it screamed and still manage to make Christmas feel magical with gifts from the clearance rack. She taught me that family meant showing up for each other, that love was action, not just words. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, she cried harder than I did. When I got my scholarship to University of Texas, she drove me to campus in our beat-up Honda, telling me how proud she was that I was going to make something of myself. College was where I met Michael, a pre-med student with kind eyes and hands that were always steady, whether he was dissecting a frog or holding mine during late-night study sessions. We were both scholarship kids, both driven by the fear of going back to the financial instability we'd grown up with. Our first apartment was a studio near campus that we could barely afford, but we made it work because we had each other and a shared vision of something better. When my mother's divorce was finalized, I was the one who helped her navigate the legal paperwork, the one who drove down from Austin every weekend to help her sort through 20 years of accumulated life. My younger brother David was off finding himself in California, sending occasional postcards but never money, never help, never presence when it mattered. It was always Sarah to the rescue, Sarah who could be counted on, Sarah who would drop everything to help family. Medical school was brutal, but Michael thrived in ways that amazed me. While other students crammed for exams, he seemed to absorb knowledge effortlessly, his mind working 3 steps ahead of everyone else. I worked part-time jobs to help support us both, watching him transform from a nervous kid from small-town Texas into someone who could literally hold a human heart in his hands and make it beat again. By our 4th year, professors were already talking about his future in cardiovascular surgery, about opportunities that would change our entire trajectory. My mother was so proud of Michael, bragging to anyone who would listen about her future son-in-law, the heart surgeon. She'd call us every Sunday, wanting to hear about his latest clinical rotations, his research projects, the way attending physicians were already fighting over who would mentor him during his residency. Those phone calls were the highlight of her week, and mine too, because it felt like we were building something together, a family success story that would lift all of us up. When Michael proposed during my graduation from nursing school, my mother cried again, but this time they were tears of pure joy. She helped me plan our wedding on a shoestring budget, the two of us spending countless hours at craft stores and estate sales, turning second-hand decorations into something beautiful. Our wedding was small but perfect, held in the backyard of the Cedar Park house where I'd grown up, with string lights and wild flowers, and my mother's homemade cake that tasted better than anything a professional bakery could have produced. Those early years of Michael's residency were hard, but we were building something together. I worked night shifts at Dell Children's Hospital while he spent 18-hour days learning to save lives, both of us too exhausted most nights to do anything but collapse into bed, and set our alarms for another day of grinding toward our dreams. My mother would send care packages filled with homemade cookies and encouraging notes reminding us that all the sacrifice would be worth it someday. She was right. When Michael finished his cardiothoracic surgery fellowship and started looking at opportunities, the offers came flooding in. Hospitals across Texas wanted him, prestigious medical centers in Dallas and Houston tried to recruit him with signing bonuses that made my head spin. But Michael had a different vision. He'd seen how cardiac care was delivered in rural and underserved communities, how patients often had to travel hours for procedures that could mean the difference between life and death. He wanted to change that. Advanced Cardiac Solutions started as Michael's crazy dream to bring world-class cardiac care to smaller Texas cities, places that had been ignored by the big medical corporations. I thought he was insane when he turned down a $250,000 salary at Houston Methodist to start his own practice in a strip mall in Round Rock, but I'd learned to trust his instincts. That first year was terrifying, just the two of us and a mountain of student loans, praying that his vision would work. It did work, better than either of us could have imagined. Within 2 years, Michael had built relationships with hospitals in Austin, San Marcos, and Georgetown, providing cardiac surgery services that saved lives and saved money. His reputation spread through the medical community like wildfire, and soon we were expanding, opening satellite clinics, hiring other surgeons who shared his vision of accessible cardiac care. By year 3, Advanced Cardiac Solutions was generating enough revenue to pay off our student loans and buy our dream house in Westlake. By year 4, Michael was being featured in medical journals and speaking at conferences about innovative approaches to cardiac care delivery. By year 5, the company was valued at over $2 million, and we had contracts with a dozen hospitals across Central Texas. My mother was endlessly proud, constantly updating her friends at the diner about Michael's latest achievements. She'd send newspaper clippings about Advanced Cardiac Solutions to her sisters, post photos of our new house on Facebook with captions about how hard work and family values had paid off. When Michael was named one of Austin's 40 under 40 inches business leaders, she framed the magazine cover and hung it in her living room where everyone could see it.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
David finally moved back to Texas around this time, settling in San Antonio, and working a series of jobs that never seemed to stick. He was the charming one, the one who could talk his way into opportunities and then talk his way out of them just as quickly. My mother worried about him constantly, sending him money she couldn't afford to spare, making excuses for his latest failed venture or broken relationship. I tried not to resent the double standard, the way his problems were met with sympathy while my successes were simply expected. It was during this period that my mother started spending more time online, joining Facebook groups for divorced women and single mothers, creating a social media presence that had never interested her before. She started posting motivational quotes and photos of sunsets, talking about new beginnings, and the possibility of finding love again. I thought it was healthy, a sign that she was finally ready to move forward, after years of focusing solely on survival and supporting her children. When she told me she'd met someone online, a man named Robert Martinez from San Antonio, I was cautiously optimistic. Bob seemed nice enough from his photos, a successful real estate developer with 2 grown children and a warm smile. They started spending weekends together, alternating between Austin and San Antonio, and my mother seemed happier than I'd seen her in years. She was taking care of herself again, buying new clothes, getting her hair done, laughing more during our phone calls. The relationship moved quickly, faster than I would have preferred, but my mother was an adult who had been alone for nearly a decade. When she told me she was thinking about moving to San Antonio to be closer to Bob, I supported her decision even though it meant she'd be 2 hours away instead of 30 minutes. When she told me they were talking about marriage, I tried to be excited for her new beginning, even though part of me worried about how well she really knew this man. What I didn't know was that during all those months of growing closer to Bob and his children, my mother was also growing apart from me. The change was so gradual I almost didn't notice it at first. Our weekly phone calls became shorter, more focused on Bob's latest real estate project, or his daughter Emma's college applications, or his son Jake's job at a local bank. When I tried to share updates about Michael's work or my own nursing career, the conversation would somehow circle back to Bob's family and their various accomplishments and challenges. I told myself this was natural, that new relationships required time and attention, that my mother was simply trying to build bridges with the people who would become part of her life. I reminded myself that I was busy too, that Advanced Cardiac Solutions was expanding faster than we'd ever anticipated, that Michael was working 16-hour days, and I was helping manage the business side of things while maintaining my own nursing career. But somewhere in the back of my mind, a small voice whispered that something fundamental was shifting, that the woman who had raised me to believe family came first was forgetting that I was still her family too. I pushed that voice down, telling myself I was being selfish, that I should be happy my mother had found love again. I had no idea that the foundation of our relationship was already cracking, preparing to crumble completely in ways I never could have imagined. The first real sign that something was wrong came during what should have been a celebration. Michael had just signed a contract to provide cardiac services to 3 new hospitals in the Rio Grande Valley, a deal that would essentially double the size of Advanced Cardiac Solutions overnight. It was the culmination of years of building relationships and proving our capabilities, a contract worth millions of dollars that would cement Michael's reputation as one of the most innovative cardiac surgeons in Texas. I called my mother immediately, excited to share the news with the person who had watched us struggle and sacrifice to build this dream. But when she answered the phone, she seemed distracted, more interested in telling me about Bob's latest real estate acquisition than hearing about Michael's achievement. When I finally managed to explain the significance of the new contract, her response was lukewarm at best, a perfunctory "that's nice, honey," before launching back into a story about how Emma had been accepted to 3 different colleges. I hung up feeling deflated and confused, wondering when my mother had stopped celebrating my victories and started treating them like minor inconveniences that interrupted her stories about Bob's children. I tried to rationalize her response, telling myself that she was probably just overwhelmed with wedding planning and the stress of blending families, but the hurt lingered longer than I wanted to admit. That phone call was the beginning of my awakening to a reality I hadn't wanted to see. My mother wasn't just building a new life with Bob Martinez. She was systematically replacing her old life, replacing the daughter who had stood by her through the hardest years of her life with stepchildren, who represented a fresh start, a chance to be the perfect mother figure she thought she'd never been able to be for David and me. The morning everything changed, started like any other Saturday in our Westlake home. Michael had left early for emergency surgery at St. David's CS, a complex valve replacement that couldn't wait for Monday, and I was enjoying the rare luxury of sleeping in until 8. Our house was peaceful in the way that only comes from hard-earned success, the kind of quiet that whispers of mortgage payments made on time and dreams that had actually come true. I padded to the kitchen in my pajamas, making coffee in the machine Michael had surprised me with for my birthday, the kind with settings I still didn't fully understand, but that made every cup taste like it came from a boutique cafe. The Austin morning was already warming up, promising another scorching Texas day, but inside our air-conditioned sanctuary, everything felt perfect and controlled. I settled onto our living room couch with my coffee and my phone, planning to catch up on the news, and maybe scroll through social media before Michael got home and we tackled our weekend to-do list. We were supposed to look at paint samples for the guest bedroom, maybe drive out to that new farmer's market in Dripping Springs that everyone was talking about. Normal weekend things for a normal weekend morning. Instagram open to the usual mix of nurse colleagues sharing their weekend plans, food photos from friends, and motivational quotes from fitness influencers. I followed but never actually took advice from. I was mindlessly double-tapping my way through the feed when a post made me stop scrolling so abruptly I nearly dropped my phone. It was a carousel of photos posted by my cousin Jessica, Linda's sister's daughter who lived in Dallas but apparently traveled to San Antonio frequently for work. The first image showed an elegant outdoor ceremony at what looked like the Grand Hyatt River Walk, complete with white draping, towering floral arrangements, and a string quartet visible in the background. The caption read, "Beautiful wedding celebration for Aunt Linda and Uncle Bob. So happy to witness their love story." My breath caught in my throat as I swiped to the next photo. There was my mother, radiant in an off-white dress that I'd never seen before, holding a bouquet of white roses and baby's breath, beaming at a man in a charcoal gray tuxedo, who could only be Bob Martinez. She looked more beautiful than I'd seen her in years, her hair professionally styled, her makeup flawless, her smile reaching all the way to her eyes in a way that spoke of pure unguarded happiness. I kept swiping, my heart starting to pound in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. Photo after photo revealed the scope of what had happened without my knowledge. The ceremony had been elaborate, clearly expensive, with probably 150 guests seated in elegant white chairs, with flowing ribbons tied to each back. There was a professional photographer capturing every moment, a videographer in the background of several shots, even what appeared to be a live painter creating a canvas of the ceremony in real time. This wasn't the small, intimate gathering my mother had mentioned in passing months ago, when she first told me they were thinking about making things official. This was a full-scale wedding celebration, the kind that required months of planning, professional vendors, and substantial financial investment. The kind where family members received formal invitations, and planned their outfits and arranged their schedules to be present for such an important milestone. I swiped again and saw the reception photos, a multi-tiered cake that probably cost more than my first car. A dance floor packed with guests, my mother and Bob in the center, lost in each other's arms, as if they were the only two people in the world. Tables decorated with centerpieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine, guests raising champagne glasses in elaborate toasts. But it was the next photo that made my stomach drop completely. A family portrait, clearly taken by the professional photographer, showing my mother and Bob surrounded by what the caption identified as their children. Bob's daughter Emma, 19 years old and stunning in a burgundy bridesmaid dress, stood on one side of the couple. His son Jake, 22 and handsome in a groomsman's tuxedo, stood on the other side. They looked like they belonged together, like they had always been a family unit, like this moment was the natural culmination of years of love and togetherness. I stared at that photo until my eyes blurred, trying to process what I was seeing. My mother had gotten married, really married, in an elaborate ceremony that had clearly been planned for months. She had worn a wedding dress, walked down an aisle, exchanged vows, cut a cake, danced with her new husband and his children. She had celebrated the beginning of her new life, with what appeared to be every important person in their social circle. And I hadn't been there. I hadn't been invited. I hadn't even known it was happening. I scrolled back through Jessica's photos, looking desperately for some sign that I had missed something, that maybe I was in the background of a shot, that maybe there was some reasonable explanation for why I wasn't visible in any of these pictures. But the more I looked, the more obvious it became that this celebration had happened completely without me, as if I didn't exist, as if 28 years of being Linda Chen's daughter had been erased from history. My hands were shaking as I opened my text messages, scrolling back through weeks of conversations with my mother. There had been mentions of wedding planning, casual references to venue visits and dress shopping, but always couched in language that made it sound hypothetical, future tense, something that might happen someday, rather than something with a confirmed date and guest list, and professional vendors already booked. 3 weeks ago, she had texted me, "Bob and I are thinking about doing something small in the spring, maybe just a simple ceremony at the courthouse with dinner afterward. Nothing fancy, you know how I feel about making a big fuss." I had responded with heart emojis, and offered to help with whatever she needed, asking if she wanted me to recommend any photographers, since Michael and I knew several through the medical community. Her response had been dismissive. "Oh, we probably won't even do photos, just something quick and easy. Bob thinks we're too old for all that traditional wedding stuff anyway." I had laughed at the time, thinking it was sweet that she was trying to be practical, that she didn't want to burden anyone with elaborate plans or expectations. Now I realized that every conversation about wedding plans had been carefully crafted to mislead me, to make me think their ceremony would be so small and informal that my absence wouldn't matter. She had lied to me systematically and deliberately, feeding me a narrative that would keep me from asking too many questions, or expecting an invitation to what was clearly the most important day of her new life. I kept scrolling through Jessica's photos, each image feeling like another knife twist. There were pictures of the rehearsal dinner, which had apparently happened the night before at an upscale restaurant downtown. More family photos, more celebration, more evidence that this had been a multi-day affair, that everyone except me had known about and participated in. In one photo, I recognized my mother's sister Carol, who lived in Houston, and rarely made it to family gatherings because of the distance. If Carol had made the trip to San Antonio for this wedding, it meant she had received enough advance notice to arrange time off work, book a hotel room, buy an appropriate outfit. It meant the guest list had been finalized, and invitations had been sent, and RSVPs had been collected. I found myself studying Bob's children in every photo, trying to understand what made them more worthy of inclusion than me. Emma was pretty in an uncomplicated way, with long dark hair, and a bright smile that seemed genuine rather than posed. Jake looked serious but kind, the type of young man who probably opened doors for elderly ladies, and helped his neighbors carry groceries. They seemed like nice enough people, but they were strangers to my mother 6 months ago. 6 months ago, these people didn't know that my mother took her coffee with 2 sugars and a splash of cream, that she cried during every episode of This Is Us, that she had a scar on her left knee from falling off her bike when she was 7 years old. They didn't know that she hummed while she cooked, that she saved every birthday card she'd ever received, that she kept a photo of my father in her jewelry box even though he'd broken her heart. But somehow, in the span of half a year, Bob's children had become more important to her than the daughter who had held her hand through her divorce, who had helped her rebuild her life from scratch, who had called her every week for 10 years to make sure she wasn't drowning in loneliness and regret. Somehow, these virtual strangers had earned the right to stand beside her on the most important day of her life, while I sat in my Austin living room, finding out about it through social media, like a distant acquaintance. I set my phone down and walked to the window, looking out at our perfectly manicured backyard, where Michael and I had hosted barbecues for my mother, where she had played with our neighbors' children, and talked about looking forward to grandchildren someday. The morning sun was streaming through the trees, creating patterns of light and shadow that should have been peaceful, but instead felt like a mockery of the darkness settling over my heart. How long had she been planning this deception? When she visited us for Easter dinner 3 months ago, had she already booked the venue? When she called to congratulate Michael on his latest hospital contract, had she already ordered her wedding dress? When she sent me a photo of herself and Bob at a wine tasting in Fredericksburg, caption "just having fun together," had they actually been scouting locations for their reception? I thought about all the times in recent months when I had offered to help with wedding planning, when I had suggested we go dress shopping together, or asked if she wanted me to research caterers or florists. She had deflected every offer with vague responses, about not being ready to make decisions yet, about wanting to keep things simple, about not wanting to impose on my busy schedule. Now I understood that she hadn't been procrastinating, or trying to be considerate of my time. She had been protecting her secret, ensuring that I remained completely in the dark about the elaborate celebration she was orchestrating without me. Every deflection had been calculated, every vague response designed to maintain the fiction that nothing concrete was being planned. The cruelest part was that I would have been happy for her. If she had called me 6 months ago and said she wanted to plan a big wedding, I would have been the first person to offer help. I would have taken time off work to go dress shopping with her, would have helped her create a guest list, and research vendors and taste cake samples. I would have stood beside her as her maid of honor, would have given a speech about how proud I was to see her find love again, after so many years of putting everyone else's needs before her own. Instead, she had chosen to cut me out completely, to build her new family without any place for the old one. She had chosen Bob's children over her own, chosen the comfort of strangers over the loyalty of a daughter who had never given her any reason to doubt my love and support. I picked up my phone again and opened my mother's Instagram account, which she had created only recently, but had been posting to with surprising frequency. Her feed was filled with photos of her new life in San Antonio, pictures of date nights with Bob, shopping trips with Emma, family dinners at restaurants I'd never heard of. There were photos of the wedding planning process I had been excluded from, shots of her trying on dresses, tasting flowers, sampling cakes. In one photo from 2 weeks ago, she and Emma were standing in what appeared to be a bridal salon, both holding champagne glasses and grinning at the camera. The caption read, "Best day ever finding the perfect dress with my daughter." My daughter, not my soon-to-be stepdaughter, not Bob's daughter, but my daughter, as if Emma had somehow replaced me in her heart, as completely as she had replaced me at the wedding. I scrolled further back and found months of evidence that my mother had been building a completely separate life, one that revolved around Bob and his children, and their friends and their interests. There were photos from college visits with Emma, pictures from Jake's graduation, from the University of Texas San Antonio, family dinners and game nights, and weekend trips that I had never heard about. She had been living a double life, maintaining just enough contact with me to avoid suspicion, while pouring all of her maternal energy into these new relationships that made her feel young and relevant, and appreciated in ways that apparently I never had. I had become an obligation, someone she checked in with out of duty rather than desire, while Bob's children had become the family she actually wanted to spend time with. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my chest ache in ways I hadn't felt since my father left. My mother had abandoned me just as completely as he had, but she had done it more subtly, more gradually, in a way that made me complicit in my own erasure. I had accepted her growing distance as natural, had convinced myself that her new relationship deserved space and understanding, had ignored the warning signs, because I wanted to believe she still loved me as much as I loved her. But love didn't work this way. Love didn't plan elaborate celebrations, while deliberately excluding the people who mattered most. Love didn't replace daughters with strangers, didn't create new families by destroying old ones, didn't build happiness on foundations of deception and betrayal. I found myself remembering conversations from months past with new clarity, seeing patterns I had missed or chosen to ignore. The way she changed the subject whenever I asked about Bob's children, the way she seemed uncomfortable when I suggested meeting them, the way she had discouraged me from visiting San Antonio, even though I had offered multiple times to make the drive. She hadn't wanted me to meet Emma and Jake because she was already positioning herself as their mother figure, already building relationships that didn't have room for reminders of her previous life. She hadn't wanted me in San Antonio because that was where her new identity lived, where she could be Bob's wife and Emma and Jake's stepmother, without the complication of her actual daughter asking difficult questions or expecting inclusion. I walked back to the couch and picked up my phone again, scrolling through Jessica's photos one more time, trying to process the magnitude of what had been hidden from me. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation.
This was about my mother choosing to create a new family while systematically excluding her existing one. This was about her deciding that I was expendable, that 28 years of history and love and shared struggle could be discarded in favor of a fresh start with people who didn't carry any emotional baggage or complicated memories. In the last photo Jessica had posted, my mother and Bob were walking away from the ceremony site hand in hand, rice or flower petals falling around them like confetti. They looked blissfully happy, completely absorbed in each other and their new beginning. And in that moment, I finally understood that I wasn't part of her future, that I had become nothing more than a reminder of a life she was eager to leave behind. The woman who had raised me to believe that family was everything had just proven that some families were worth more than others, and I wasn't part of the one that mattered to her anymore. The mother who had taught me that love was about showing up for people had just shown up for everyone except the person who had been showing up for her my entire life. I sat in my beautiful living room, surrounded by the success that Michael and I had built together, the life we had created through hard work and sacrifice and unwavering support for each other's dreams. But none of that mattered in this moment, because the person who had taught me how to love, how to be loyal, how to put family first, had just demonstrated that those lessons had been lies, pretty stories she told me while planning to abandon me the moment something better came along. The silence in my house felt deafening as I sat with my phone in my lap, staring at the wedding photos that had shattered my world in the span of 10 minutes. For nearly an hour, I had been cycling through the same emotions, shock giving way to hurt, hurt dissolving into confusion, confusion hardening into something I had never allowed myself to feel toward my mother before this moment, pure undiluted anger. But as I sat there in the aftermath of discovery, something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, raw and bleeding, but underneath it was growing something else entirely. A cold determination that surprised me with its intensity. For 28 years, I had been the good daughter, the understanding one, the one who made excuses for other people's behavior and absorbed their neglect without complaint. I had spent my entire life being grateful for whatever scraps of attention and affection my parents were willing to throw my way. Not anymore. I stood up from the couch with a purpose I hadn't felt in years, my movements sharp and decisive in a way that felt foreign but right. If my mother could plan an elaborate wedding celebration while deliberately excluding me, if she could lie to my face for months while building a new family to replace me, then she had fundamentally changed the rules of our relationship. She had shown me exactly how much I meant to her, and now I was going to show her exactly what it felt like to be on the receiving end of that kind of dismissal. I walked to my laptop and opened it with steady hands, my mind already formulating exactly what I needed to do. This wasn't about revenge, though I won't pretend that element wasn't satisfying to consider. This was about reclaiming my voice, about refusing to be erased without consequences, about making sure that my mother understood she couldn't simply delete me from her life and expect me to disappear quietly into the background. The first thing I did was screenshot every single one of Jessica's wedding photos, saving them to a folder on my desktop that I labeled Linda's Secret Wedding. I wanted evidence of what had happened, documentation of the elaborate celebration I had been excluded from, proof that this hadn't been the small courthouse ceremony my mother had described to me. These photos would serve as receipts for a conversation that was long overdue. Next, I opened my own Instagram account and began crafting a post that would change everything between us forever. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment as I considered the magnitude of what I was about to do. Once I posted this, there would be no taking it back, no pretending that nothing had happened, no allowing my mother to gaslight me into believing that her actions were reasonable or justified.
Good. I was done pretending, done making excuses, done being the bigger person while everyone else in my family felt free to treat me however they pleased. I started typing, my words flowing with a clarity that surprised me. Congratulations to my mother Linda Chen Martinez on her beautiful wedding celebration in San Antonio this weekend. The photos look absolutely stunning, and it's clear that so much love and thought went into planning such an elaborate and meaningful ceremony. I'm sure Bob's children Emma and Jake will treasure these memories of their new stepmother's special day forever. As her actual daughter, I'm touched that she felt comfortable enough in our relationship to not even mention that this was happening, let alone invite me to attend. Nothing says family first like finding out about your mother's wedding through your cousin's Instagram posts. Wishing the happy couple and their chosen family all the best in their new life together. I read through the post 3 times, adjusting the wording to ensure that every sentence was perfectly crafted to highlight the absurdity and cruelty of what had happened without descending into obvious bitterness or hysteria. The tone was congratulatory on the surface, but every word was calculated to expose the dysfunction underneath. Anyone reading this would immediately understand that something was very wrong with this family dynamic. I attached several of the wedding photos to the post, including the family portrait that showed my mother beaming with Bob's children while I was nowhere to be found. The visual evidence would speak louder than any words I could write, making it impossible for anyone to dismiss this as a misunderstanding or an overreaction on my part. My finger hovered over the share button for just a moment as I considered the nuclear nature of what I was about to unleash. This post would be visible to my extended family, my nursing colleagues, Michael's medical contacts, the people from my neighborhood, and my gym and my college alumni network. It would start conversations that my mother couldn't control, raise questions she couldn't easily answer, force her to confront the consequences of her choices in a very public way. Perfect. If she could make me feel small and forgotten, I could make her feel exposed and accountable. I hit share and watched as the post immediately began generating likes and comments. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with notifications as friends and family members began responding with shocked emojis and supportive messages. The comment section filled up with people expressing disbelief that a mother could treat her daughter this way, offering virtual hugs and asking if I was okay. But it was the private messages that really drove home the impact of what I had just done. My nursing supervisor from Dell Children's sent a text saying she couldn't believe what she had just read and asking if I needed anything. My college roommate called and left a voicemail expressing her outrage on my behalf. Michael's medical partner sent a message saying he and his wife were thinking of me, and that family dynamics could be incredibly hurtful sometimes. Most significantly, family members started reaching out with their own shock and confusion. My cousin Jessica called within 30 minutes of my post going live, her voice tight with anxiety as she explained that she had had no idea I wasn't invited to the wedding. She had assumed I was there but just not visible in the photos she had posted, and she was mortified to discover that her innocent social media sharing had been the way I found out about my own mother's marriage. Aunt Carol texted me from Houston, her message a string of question marks followed by "call me immediately." When I did call her back, she was practically incoherent with rage, demanding to know how Linda could have done such a thing, and insisting that she would never have attended the wedding if she had known I wasn't invited. She revealed that my mother had specifically told family members that I couldn't make it due to work obligations. Another deliberate lie designed to cover up the fact that I had never been invited in the first place. Uncle Tom sent a Facebook message expressing his confusion and disappointment, saying that he had asked Linda where I was during the reception, and had been told that Michael and I were dealing with a medical emergency that prevented us from attending. He apologized for not reaching out at the time to check on us, assuming that if there had been a real emergency, someone would have mentioned it to him directly. Even David, my usually oblivious brother, managed to call me from his apartment in California, his voice uncharacteristically serious, as he tried to process what had happened. He admitted that our mother had been distant with him too lately, but he had chalked it up to her being busy with Bob and the normal adjustments that come with a new relationship. He had no idea she was capable of something this deliberately hurtful, and he was struggling to reconcile the mother he remembered with the woman who could exclude her own daughter from her wedding. As the day wore on and my post continued to generate responses, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months of dealing with my mother's growing distance validation. For the first time since this whole situation had started, other people were confirming that her behavior was not normal, not acceptable, not something I should have to tolerate or understand. The gaslighting that had been slowly eroding my confidence was finally being exposed for what it was. But the real satisfaction came when my phone rang at 6:30 that evening, Michael's name appearing on the screen. He had just finished his surgery and was checking his messages for the first time all day, which meant he had just seen my Instagram post, and probably several concerned texts from colleagues who followed both of us on social media. "Sarah, what the hell happened?" His voice was exhausted from the long surgery but sharp with concern. "I just saw your post about your mother's wedding. Please tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding." I filled him in on the entire day, from my casual morning social media scroll, to the devastating discovery to my decision to go public with what had happened. Michael listened without interrupting, his breathing getting heavier as I described each layer of deception and betrayal that my mother had orchestrated. "I can't believe she did this to you," he said finally, his voice tight with an anger I rarely heard from him. Michael was usually the calm one in our relationship, the voice of reason who encouraged me to see all sides of a situation before reacting. But there was no reasonable explanation for what my mother had done, no perspective that could make her behavior acceptable. "I keep thinking I should feel bad about posting that," I admitted to him. "Like maybe I should have tried to talk to her privately first, given her a chance to explain herself." "Explain what?" Michael's response was immediate and fierce. "How do you explain lying to your daughter for months about your wedding? How do you explain deliberately excluding her from the most important day of your life?" "Sarah, there is no explanation that makes this okay." His validation meant everything to me in that moment. Michael had watched my relationship with my mother for 8 years, had seen how hard I tried to maintain our connection despite her growing self-absorption and distance. He had encouraged me to be patient with her adjustment to dating again, to give her space to figure out how to blend her old life with her new one. But even he, the most generous and understanding person I knew, couldn't find any justification for what she had done. "What are you going to do when she calls?" he asked, because we both knew that my Instagram post had guaranteed that conversation was coming. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Part of me wants to let her scramble to explain herself, see what kind of lies she comes up with. But mostly I just want her to understand how it feels to be excluded and dismissed, to know what it's like when someone you love treats you like you don't matter." My phone started buzzing with an incoming call even as I was speaking to Michael. The screen showed my mother's name, and for a moment my resolve wavered. Despite everything that had happened, despite the calculated cruelty of her deception, she was still my mother. The woman who had raised me, who had sacrificed for me, who had been my closest ally for so many years. But then I remembered the wedding photos, the image of her beaming with Bob's children, while I sat at home completely unaware that this celebration was even happening. I remembered months of lies and deflections, the systematic way she had erased me from her new life, while pretending that nothing had changed between us. "Let it go to voicemail," Michael said, reading my hesitation perfectly. "You don't owe her an immediate response, not after what she did." He was right. For once in my life, I was going to make someone else wait for my attention, someone else wonder if I cared enough to call them back. My mother had spent months planning her wedding without any consideration for my feelings or my place in her life. She could spend a few hours wondering what I was thinking about hers. The call went to voicemail, and within seconds, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Sarah, please call me. We need to talk about your post. Not I'm sorry. Not I can explain. Not I know you must be hurt. Just a demand that we talk about my post," as if my public response to her betrayal was somehow the real problem in this situation. I showed the text to Michael when he got home an hour later, and his jaw tightened as he read it. "She's more concerned about her image than your feelings," he observed with surgical precision. "Even now when she's been caught, she's thinking about damage control instead of damage repair." That realization crystallized something for me that had been building all day. This wasn't just about a wedding invitation, wasn't just about being excluded from one event, no matter how important. This was about my mother revealing her true priorities, showing me exactly where I ranked in her life, now that she had other options. And that ranking was apparently somewhere below her comfort, her convenience, and her desire to present a perfect blended family to the world. If she had called immediately to apologize, if her first text had acknowledged my pain instead of focusing on her embarrassment, maybe we could have found a way through this. But her instinctive response to being exposed was to manage the situation rather than address the hurt she had caused, and that told me everything I needed to know about who she had become. My phone rang again at 9 o'clock, and again at 9:30.
Both times I let it go to voicemail, and both times she left increasingly frantic messages asking me to call her back, saying we needed to discuss this misunderstanding before it got out of hand. Misunderstanding. As if there was some reasonable explanation for months of deception, some innocent reason why I had been excluded from her wedding, while strangers were welcomed into our family. As if my hurt and anger were based on a failure to comprehend, rather than a clear-eyed understanding of exactly what she had chosen to do. By 10 o'clock, my Instagram post had been shared dozens of times, and had generated over 200 comments, most of them expressing support for me and disbelief at my mother's behavior. The story was spreading through our extended family and social networks like wildfire, and I knew that my mother was probably fielding calls and messages from relatives, demanding to know how she could have done such a thing. Good. For the first time in our relationship, she was the one dealing with consequences, the one having to explain herself, the one whose actions were being scrutinized and judged by people who mattered to her. She was learning what it felt like to be on the defensive, to have her choices questioned, to face criticism for behavior that couldn't be justified or explained away. When Michael and I went to bed that night, my phone was still buzzing with notifications, but I turned it face down on my nightstand, and tried to focus on the steady rhythm of his breathing beside me. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, more confrontations, more opportunities for my mother to prove whether she was capable of genuine remorse, or only damage control. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt powerful instead of powerless, heard instead of invisible, important instead of expendable. I had spent my entire life managing other people's emotions and protecting their feelings, often at the expense of my own well-being. I had been the good daughter, the understanding ex-wife, the supportive friend who never asked for anything in return. That version of me had been erased from my mother's wedding photos, written out of her new family narrative, discarded like an outdated photograph that no longer fit the image she wanted to project. But in trying to delete me from her life, she had accidentally created something far more dangerous, a version of me that was done being invisible, done being grateful for scraps, done accepting less than I deserved, from people who claimed to love me. Tomorrow she would learn just how thoroughly she had underestimated the daughter she thought she could discard without consequences. Tomorrow the real conversation would begin, and this time, I would be the one setting the terms. The call came at 7:45 the next morning, jarring me awake from the first solid sleep I'd managed in weeks. Michael had already left for his morning rounds at the hospital, and I was alone in our bedroom, when my mother's name flashed across my phone screen for what felt like the 100th time since my Instagram post had gone viral. This time I answered, "Sarah, thank God." Her voice was strained, higher pitched than usual, carrying an edge of desperation I had never heard from her before. "We need to talk immediately. This whole thing has gotten completely out of hand." I sat up in bed, my mind instantly clear despite having just woken up. "Good morning to you too, Mom. How was your honeymoon?" The silence on the other end stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When she finally spoke again, her voice was carefully controlled, the way it got when she was trying not to lose her temper. "Sarah, I need you to take down that post. People are calling me non-stop, asking questions I shouldn't have to answer. Aunt Carol is threatening to drive down here from Houston to have words with me. Maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to get married without telling your daughter," I replied, my own voice steady and calm in a way that surprised me. "Or maybe you should have considered how it would look when people found out I wasn't even invited to my own mother's wedding." "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into her tone. "The situation was complicated, Sarah. There were a lot of moving pieces, a lot of people to consider. Bob's ex-wife has been causing problems, and his kids were already struggling with the idea of him remarrying. I didn't want to make things more difficult by adding more complications to the mix." I felt my jaw clench at her words. "So I'm a complication now. Your own daughter is a problem that needed to be managed rather than included." That's not what I said, but her protest sounded weak even to her own ears. "Look, I know how this must look from the outside, but you don't understand the full situation. Bob's family dynamics are delicate, and I was trying to be sensitive to everyone's needs. Everyone except mine, apparently." I got out of bed and walked to the window, looking out at the Austin morning, while I processed the audacity of what she was trying to sell me. "Mom, I saw the photos. This wasn't some small simple ceremony that got out of hand. You planned an elaborate wedding with professional photographers, a full reception, formal attire, and over 100 guests. You planned this for months, and you deliberately chose not to include me. Another long pause. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted, taking on the patronizing tone she used when she thought I was being unreasonable. Sarah, you're a grown woman with your own life, your own career, your own marriage. I didn't think you'd want to be bothered with all the stress and obligations that come with wedding planning. You're so busy with Michael's practice and your nursing career. I was trying to protect you from having to take on more responsibilities. The gaslighting was so blatant, so insulting to my intelligence, that I actually laughed out loud. You were protecting me. By lying to me for months about your wedding plans. By telling family members that I couldn't attend due to work obligations. By posting photos on social media of your new family, without any explanation of where your actual daughter was. I never said you couldn't attend due to work, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Uncle Tom told me exactly what you said to him when he asked where I was at the reception. Aunt Carol said you told her weeks ago that I was dealing with medical emergencies and wouldn't be able to make it. You created an entire fictional narrative to explain my absence, rather than just admitting that you chose not to invite me. The silence stretched again, and I could practically hear her scrambling for a new angle, a different explanation that might somehow justify the unjustifiable. Sarah, I think you're blowing this out of proportion. Yes, maybe I could have handled the communication better, but the important thing is that I'm happy now. Bob makes me happy in ways I haven't felt in years, and his children have welcomed me into their family with open arms. I thought you'd want that for me. I do want you to be happy, I said, and I meant it, but not at the expense of erasing your existing family. Not by replacing me with Bob's children, and pretending like 28 years of being your daughter counts for nothing. I'm not replacing you, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, they sounded hollow and unconvincing. Emma and Jake are good kids, and yes, I've grown fond of them, but that doesn't change how I feel about you. Doesn't it? I challenged her. When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time you asked about my life, my job, my marriage, my dreams, without immediately steering the conversation back to Bob or his children? When was the last time you treated me like I mattered to you? She was quiet for so long I thought she might have hung up. Finally she cleared her throat and said, I call you every week. You call me out of obligation. There's a difference between checking a box and actually caring about someone's life. And even those calls have become shorter and more superficial since you moved to San Antonio. You spend 5 minutes asking how I am, and then 20 minutes telling me about Emma's college applications, or Jake's new job, or Bob's latest real estate deal. They're part of my life now, she said defensively. I thought you'd want to know about the people who are important to me. The people who are important to you, I repeated slowly. That's exactly the problem, Mom. You've made it crystal clear that Bob's children are important to you, in ways that I apparently am not. They get your time, your attention, your affection, your motherly pride. They get to be in your wedding photos, and your social media posts about family. They get the version of you that I grew up thinking was reserved for your actual children. That's not fair, she protested. You're twisting everything around. Am I? Let me ask you something, Mom. When you were planning your wedding guest list, at what point did you decide not to include me? Was it a conscious decision, or did you simply forget I existed until it was too late to send an invitation? The question hung in the air between us like a challenge, and I could hear her breathing getting shallower, as she realized there was no good answer. If she claimed it was an oversight, she was admitting to being so absorbed in her new life, that she forgot about her own daughter. If she admitted it was deliberate, she was confessing to a level of cruelty that even she might struggle to justify. It wasn't like that, she said finally, her voice smaller now. The planning just got so complicated, and there were so many people to coordinate with, and Bob's family had such strong opinions about how things should be done. I didn't want to create conflict by insisting on changes that might upset the balance we'd worked so hard to achieve. So you threw me under the bus to keep Bob's family happy, I said, the pieces finally clicking into place. You sacrificed your relationship with your own daughter to avoid making waves with people you've known for less than a year. Sarah, please try to understand. Starting over at my age is terrifying. Bob's children are young adults who didn't have to accept me, but they did. His ex-wife could have made things impossible for us, but she's been surprisingly cooperative. I didn't want to rock the boat by introducing complications that might jeopardize the stability we'd built. And I'm a complication, I said quietly. Your own daughter is a threat to your new family's stability. You're putting words in my mouth. I'm repeating your words back to you. You just told me that including me in your wedding might have jeopardized your relationship with Bob's family. You just admitted that you chose their comfort over my feelings, their acceptance over my inclusion. You just confirmed that I rank below strangers in your list of priorities. She was crying now, soft sniffles that she was trying to hide but couldn't quite manage. I never meant for it to happen this way. I never meant to hurt you. But you did hurt me, I said, my own voice thick with emotion, despite my attempts to stay detached. You hurt me in ways I'm not sure I'll ever get over. It's not just about the wedding, Mom. It's about what the wedding represents. It's about you choosing to build a new family, while systematically excluding your old one. It's about you deciding that I don't fit into the life you want to live. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you invited me to San Antonio? When was the last time you suggested I meet Emma and Jake? When was the last time you included me in any of the family activities you post about on social media? You've been living a completely separate life down there, and the only reason I know anything about it is because you occasionally mention it during our increasingly brief phone calls. She was quiet again, and I could almost hear her mind working, trying to find some explanation that would make her behavior seem reasonable. But there wasn't one, and we both knew it. I want to fix this, she said finally. Tell me how to fix this. I don't know if you can, I answered honestly. The damage isn't just about what you did, it's about what it revealed about how you really feel about me, about what our relationship actually means to you. You can't unplan a wedding that excluded me. You can't take back months of lies and deception. You can't undo the fact that when push came to shove, you chose
other people over your own daughter. So what are you saying? That we can't have a relationship anymore? I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of 28 years of love and disappointment and hope and betrayal. I'm saying that the relationship we had is over. The mother who raised me, who taught me about loyalty and family and showing up for people you love, that woman wouldn't have done what you did. The woman who excluded me from her wedding is someone I don't recognize, someone I'm not sure I want to know. She was sobbing openly now, her words coming out in broken gasps. Sarah, please, you're my daughter, you'll always be my daughter. I love you. Do you? I asked quietly. Because love is supposed to be about more than just saying the words. Love is supposed to be about actions, about choices, about prioritizing the people who matter to you. And your actions over the past year have shown me exactly where I stand in your life. I can change, she pleaded. I can do better. Give me another chance. I gave you chances, Mom. Every time you canceled plans to spend time with Bob's family instead, I gave you a chance. Every time you cut our phone calls short to take Emma shopping or help Jake with something, I gave you a chance. Every time you posted photos of your new family while barely mentioning your actual children, I gave you a chance. I've been giving you chances for months while you systematically replaced me with people who were easier to love. They're not easier to love, she said desperately. They're just different. They needed me in ways that you don't anymore. You have Michael, you have your career, you have your own life. They needed a mother figure. And what about what I needed? The question came out sharper than I intended, carrying years of unspoken hurt and frustration. What about the fact that I needed my mother to show up for the biggest moments in my life? What about the fact that I needed you to be proud of what Michael and I have built together? What about the fact that I needed you to include me in your new happiness instead of treating me like a relic from a life you wanted to forget? I am proud of you, she whispered. Not enough to include me in your wedding. Not enough to introduce me to your stepchildren. Not enough to make me feel like I still mattered to you after you found something better. The conversation was spiraling toward a conclusion I wasn't ready for but couldn't avoid. We had reached the point where all the words had been said, all the hurt had been acknowledged, all the betrayals had been laid bare. What remained was the fundamental question of whether there was anything left to salvage from the wreckage of our relationship. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice barely audible. I want you to understand that what you did can't be undone, I said slowly. I want you to stop trying to justify it or minimize it or pretend it was anything other than a deliberate choice to exclude me from your life. I want you to acknowledge that you chose Bob's family over your own daughter, and that choice has consequences. And then what? If I acknowledge all of that, if I admit that I made terrible mistakes, what happens then? I stared out my bedroom window at the life Michael and I had built together, the success we had achieved through mutual support and unwavering loyalty to each other's dreams. I thought about the family we were hoping to start someday, the children we would raise to understand that love was about showing up, about inclusion, about making the people you care about feel valued and important. I don't know, I admitted. I honestly don't know if we can come back from this. But I know we can't move forward until you stop pretending that what you did was somehow justified or understandable. Until you stop making excuses and start taking responsibility for the choices you made. She was quiet for a long time, and when she finally spoke, her voice was different, somehow more subdued, more genuinely regretful than it had been throughout our entire conversation. You're right. I made choices that put other people's comfort ahead of your feelings, and that was wrong. I convinced myself that I was protecting everyone, but really I was just taking the path of least resistance, even if it meant hurting the person who had never given me any reason to doubt her loyalty. It was the closest thing to a real apology she had offered, but even as I heard the words, I realized they weren't enough to bridge the gap that had opened between us. Too much damage had been done, too many lies had been told, too many chances had been wasted. I need time, I said finally. I need space to figure out how I feel about all of this, how I want to move forward, whether I even want to try to rebuild what we had. How much time? I don't know. Maybe a lot, maybe forever. I can't promise you that we'll find our way back to each other, Mom. What you did changed something fundamental about how I see you, how I see us, how I understand what family means. I need to figure out if that change is permanent. She started to say something else, but I cut her off gently. I have to go now. Michael will be home soon, and I want to talk to him about all of this. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again. Sarah, wait. Before you hang up, there's something else you need to know. The tone of her voice made my stomach drop. After everything we had just discussed, after all the revelations and confessions and painful truths, what could possibly be left to reveal? Bob's mother is in the hospital, she said quietly. She had a massive heart attack 3 days ago, and the doctors in San Antonio are saying she needs immediate cardiac surgery if she's going to survive. The kind of surgery that only specialists can perform, the kind that requires connections and influence and the best possible care. I felt my blood turn cold as I realized where this conversation was heading. Mom, please tell me you're not about to ask me what I think you're about to ask me. We need Michael's help, she said in a rush, the words tumbling out like she was afraid I'd hang up before she could get them all out. The doctors here don't have the expertise for this kind of procedure, and the waiting list at the major hospitals in Houston and Dallas could take weeks. But Michael has relationships with the best cardiac surgeons in Texas, and Advanced Cardiac Solutions has contracts with hospitals that could fast-track her case. We need his connections, Sarah. Bob's mother is dying, and we don't have anyone else to turn to. The silence that followed her request was deafening. After everything we had just discussed, after her acknowledgement of how badly she had treated me, after her admission that she had chosen Bob's family over her own daughter, she was now asking me to use my husband's medical practice to save the life of a woman who was part of the family that had been deemed more important than me. You have got to be kidding me, I said finally, my voice flat with disbelief. Sarah, I know how this sounds. I know the timing is terrible, but this isn't about our relationship problems. This is about a woman's life. Bob's mother is a good person who doesn't deserve to die because of mistakes I made in how I handled my wedding. A woman's life, I repeated slowly. Bob's mother, the grandmother of the children who got to stand beside you at your wedding while I found out about it on Instagram. Sarah, please, I'm begging you, put aside everything else for just a moment, and think about what's right here. Michael took an oath to save lives. You became a nurse because you wanted to help people. This is bigger than our family drama. Our family drama, the phrase hit me like a slap. After everything we had just discussed, she was still minimizing what had happened, still treating the systematic destruction of our relationship like some minor disagreement that could be set aside when it became inconvenient. You want to know what's really incredible about this? I said, my voice getting stronger as my anger built. 3 days ago, you were perfectly content to have me out of your life. You got married without me, started your new family without me,
Planned your future without me.
But now, when you need something that only I can provide, suddenly I'm important enough to call. Suddenly I'm family again. It's not like that, she protested weakly. It's exactly like that. You threw me away when I was inconvenient, and now you want to pick me up and use me when I'm useful. You want me to ask my husband to put his reputation and his professional relationships on the line to save a woman who's part of the family you chose over me. Sarah, she's dying, and you didn't invite me to your wedding. The words came out sharp and final, cutting through any attempt at emotional manipulation. You made your choice about what family means to you, Mom. You decided that Bob's family was worth protecting, and mine was expendable. Now you get to live with that choice. So you're going to let an innocent woman die, because you're angry with me. The accusation hung in the air like poison, and for a moment I felt the familiar guilt, the instinctive need to be the bigger person, to sacrifice my own needs for the sake of keeping peace. But then I remembered the wedding photos, the systematic lies, the months of being treated like I didn't exist. I'm not letting anyone die, I said quietly. Bob's mother has access to the same medical system as everyone else. She can get on waiting lists, she can seek second opinions, she can pursue every avenue that's available to people who don't happen to be related to someone with connections. What I'm not going to do is allow you to use a medical emergency to manipulate me into pretending that what you did to me doesn't matter. Michael could save her life. Michael could probably help a lot of people if we used his connections and influence for every medical emergency that comes our way. But we don't, because that's not how the system is supposed to work. People don't get to cut in line because they happen to know someone with influence. This is different. How? How is this different from any other cardiac emergency? Because she's related to your new husband. Because helping her would benefit the family you chose over your own daughter. She was crying again, but this time it felt different, more calculated, more designed to elicit sympathy than express genuine emotion. Sarah, I'm sorry about the wedding. I'm sorry about everything, but this woman doesn't deserve to pay for my mistakes. You're right, I agreed. She doesn't deserve to pay for your mistakes. But neither do I, and asking me to fix your problems with my husband's career after you excluded me from your life is just another kind of betrayal. What if it was Michael's mother? What if someone you loved was dying, and you needed help from someone you'd hurt? Wouldn't you hope they'd be big enough to put aside their anger for the sake of saving a life? The hypothetical hit close to home, and I felt my resolve waver for just a moment. But then I remembered something Michael had said to me just the night before. There is no explanation that makes this okay. If it was Michael's mother and I had treated someone the way you treated me, I would understand if they told me no, I said finally. I would understand that actions have consequences, that betraying someone's trust doesn't entitle you to their help when you need it. I would understand that you can't throw someone away, and then expect them to save you. So that's it. You're just going to turn your back on us. I'm not turning my back on anyone. I'm simply refusing to pretend that what you did to me doesn't matter. You made choices about what family meant to you, about who was worth protecting and who was expendable. Now you get to live with those choices, even when they're inconvenient. Sarah, please, I'll do anything to make this right between us. I'll apologize publicly. I'll tell everyone how wrong I was. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just please, help us with this. The rest of your life making it up to me. I couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Mom, 3 days ago you were content to never speak to me again. You were perfectly happy with your new family and your new life that didn't include me. The only reason you want to make things right now is because you need something from me. That's not true, isn't it? If Bob's mother wasn't in the hospital, would you have called me? Would you have taken down the wedding photos that exclude me? Would you have had any conversations with Emma and Jake about the daughter you erased from your life? Or would you have just continued living your separate life in San Antonio, occasionally calling me out of obligation while building your real family with Bob's children? The silence stretched long enough to answer my question. She would have continued exactly as she had been, treating me like an obligation while pouring her maternal energy into her stepchildren, content to let our relationship wither away as long as it didn't interfere with her new happiness. I want you to think about something, I said, my voice calm and clear. You're asking me to use my husband's medical practice to save the life of a woman whose grandchildren got to be in your wedding photos while your own daughter was excluded. You're asking me to put Michael's reputation on the line for the sake of people who were more important to you than I was. You're asking me to prioritize the family you chose over your own feelings and interests. Sarah, I understand why you're angry, but this is about more than just family dynamics. This is about life and death. You're right, it is about life and death. It's about the death of our relationship which you caused when you decided that Bob's family was worth more to you than your own daughter. And now you want me to resurrect that relationship just long enough to save the life of someone who represents everything you chose over me. What would it take? She asked desperately. What would I have to do to convince you to help us? I thought about her question for a long moment, considering whether there was any gesture or apology or promise that could undo the damage that had been done. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the problem wasn't just what she had done.
The problem was who she had revealed herself to be. Nothing, I said finally. There's nothing you could do that would convince me to help you with this, because this request proves that you still don't understand what you did wrong. Even now, even after everything we've discussed, you're still trying to use me for your benefit. You're still treating me like a resource to be exploited, rather than a daughter to be loved. That's not what I'm doing, it's exactly what you're doing. And the fact that you can't see it, even now, tells me everything I need to know about whether we can ever have a real relationship again. I could hear her breathing getting more ragged, could sense that she was building up to some final desperate plea that might break my resolve. But I was done being manipulated, done being guilted into sacrificing my own well-being for the sake of people who had shown me exactly how little I meant to them. Mom, I need to go now. Michael will be home soon, and I need to talk to him about this conversation. Are you going to tell him about Bob's mother? I'm going to tell him everything. About the wedding, about your request, about the way you've treated me, and the way you're trying to use me now. And then I'm going to let him decide whether he wants to get involved in this situation. What do you think he'll say? I thought about Michael, about his integrity and his sense of justice and his deep love for me. I thought about how angry he had been the night before when he saw my Instagram post, how protective he had become when he understood the scope of my mother's betrayal. I think he'll tell you the same thing I'm telling you, I said. That actions have consequences, that you can't treat people badly and then expect them to save you when it's convenient. I think he'll tell you that if you wanted our help, you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't worth including in your family. Sarah, please, don't let this be how our story ends. I paused at the front door, my keys in my hand, ready to leave for my shift at the hospital. The life I had built with Michael, the career I had worked so hard for, the future we were planning together, all of it suddenly felt more precious and more fragile than it had before this conversation. Mom, you ended our story when you planned your wedding without me. Everything that's happened since then has just been the epilogue. I hung up the phone and walked out to my car, leaving behind the woman who had raised me and the relationship that had defined so much of my life. As I drove toward the hospital where I would spend the day caring for other people's mothers and daughters and families, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. For the first time in my adult life, I had chosen my own dignity over someone else's convenience. I had refused to be used, refused to be manipulated, refused to pretend that love was supposed to hurt this much. I had finally learned the lesson that my mother's actions had been trying to teach me all along, that some relationships are too broken to fix, and some people will only value you when they need something from you. Bob's mother would find the medical care she needed through the proper channels, or she wouldn't. Emma and Jake would learn that actions have consequences, or they wouldn't. My mother would understand that she had lost her daughter through her own choices, or she would continue to blame me for refusing to be her safety net. But I would be fine. I had Michael, I had my career, I had a life built on mutual respect and genuine love, rather than obligation and manipulation. I had learned that blood doesn't make you family, and family doesn't give you the right to treat people badly without consequences. I was finally free. Michael found me sitting on our back patio that evening, watching the sun set over the Austin Hills while nursing a glass of wine that had gone warm in my hands. I hadn't touched it since pouring it an hour earlier, my mind too preoccupied with the conversation that had shattered what remained of my relationship with my mother to focus on anything as simple as drinking. He settled into the chair beside me without saying anything, his presence solid and reassuring in a way that made my throat tighten with gratitude. After 8 years of marriage, he knew when I needed space to process, and when I needed him to fill the silence with his voice. Tonight was clearly a space to process kind of evening. Rough phone call with Linda, he asked finally, his voice gentle but knowing. He had seen my car in the driveway when he got home from the hospital, had probably noticed that I hadn't started dinner or changed out of my scrubs, or done any of the 100 small things that usually marked my transition from work to home. That's putting it mildly. I turned to look at him, this man who had supported every dream I'd ever had, who had built a medical empire, while never making me feel like I was anything less than his equal partner in life. She asked me to have you use your connections to save Bob's mother's life. Michael's eyebrows shot up, and I watched him process the implications of what I had just said. His mother is sick, massive heart attack, needs emergency cardiac surgery that apparently only the best specialists can perform. The kind of surgery that requires connections and influence, and the ability to cut through red tape. I took a sip of my wine, finally, and grimaced at how warm it had become. She wants you to use advanced cardiac solutions to fast-track her case. After she excluded you from her wedding. After she systematically erased me from her new family, lied to our relatives about why I wasn't there, and then tried to gaslight me into believing that none of it was deliberate. I set my wine glass down on the small table between our chairs. She actually had the audacity to ask me to put aside our family dramas to help save a life. Michael was quiet for a long moment, his medical mind probably running through the logistics of what my mother was asking, while his husband brain processed the emotional manipulation involved in the request. What did you tell her? I told her no. The words came out steadier than I felt. I told her that she made choices about what family meant to her, and now she gets to live with those choices even when they're inconvenient. Good. His response was immediate and firm, without even a hint of the hesitation I had feared might be there. Sarah, what she did to you was unforgivable. The fact that she's now trying to use a medical emergency to manipulate you into helping her proves that she still doesn't understand how badly she hurt you. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. Part of me had been worried that Michael might think I was being cruel, that his medical ethics might compel him to want to help regardless of the personal cost. But he understood what I was only beginning to articulate to myself. This wasn't about denying medical care to someone who needed it. This was about refusing to be manipulated by someone who had already proven that my value to her was purely transactional. She kept saying it was about life and death, like that somehow trumped everything else, I said, leaning back in my chair and closing my eyes. Like being a good person meant I had to forget about being deliberately excluded from my own mother's wedding. You know what's really about life and death. Michael's voice carried an edge I rarely heard from him. The death of your relationship with your mother, which she caused when she decided that Bob's family was more important than her own daughter. She killed that relationship herself, and now she wants to resurrect it just long enough to use your connections. That's exactly what I told her. I opened my eyes and looked at him again, this man who had never once made me feel like I wasn't his top priority, who had built his entire medical practice around the principle that everyone deserved excellent care regardless of their connections or status. I told her that you don't get to throw someone away and then expect them to save you. Did she understand that? I don't think she's capable of understanding it. Even after everything we discussed, even after she admitted that she chose Bob's family over me, she still couldn't see why I might not want to help her. She kept asking what it would take to convince me, like there was some magic combination of words or promises that could undo months of systematic betrayal. Michael reached over and took my hand, his fingers warm and steady against mine. There isn't, is there? No. The admission felt both liberating and devastating. I kept waiting for her to say something that would make this fixable, something that would prove she understood what she had done, and was genuinely sorry for it. But even her apologies were conditional, tied to what she needed from me rather than any real recognition of how much she had hurt me. What happens now? I squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the certainty of our connection. Now we move forward with our lives. We finish expanding advanced cardiac solutions. We buy that vacation house in Colorado we've been talking about. We start trying for the family we want to build together. We create something based on mutual respect and genuine love, instead of obligation and manipulation. And your mother? My mother made her choice when she planned her wedding without me. She chose Bob's family over her own daughter, chose comfort over integrity, chose the easy path over doing what was right. Now she gets to live with that choice, even when it means she doesn't have access to the connections and resources that could help her new family in times of crisis. Michael was quiet for a moment, and I could see him thinking through the implications of what I was saying. You know there's going to be fallout from this, right? Other family members who think you should help regardless of what happened between you two. People who think medical emergencies trump personal grievances. Let them think that. I stood up from my chair and walked to the railing of our deck, looking out over the life we had built together in this beautiful house, in this beautiful neighborhood that we had earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. Anyone who thinks I should set aside my own dignity to help people who deliberately excluded me from their family doesn't understand what family is supposed to mean. Some people are going to say you're being petty. Some people didn't watch their mother systematically replace them with strangers while pretending nothing had changed. I turned back to face him. Some people didn't find out about their own mother's wedding through social media posts. Some people haven't spent months being lied to and manipulated by the person who was supposed to love them unconditionally. Michael stood up and joined me at the railing, slipping his arms around me from behind in a gesture that felt like coming home. You're absolutely right. And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. I know how hard it must have been to say no to her, especially when she framed it as a matter of life and death. It was hard, I admitted, leaning back against his chest. There's a part of me that was trained from childhood to put everyone else's needs before my own, to be the good daughter who never caused problems or made demands. That part of me wanted to say yes, just to avoid being seen as the bad guy in this situation. But you didn't. But I didn't. For the first time in my life, I chose my own well-being over someone else's convenience. I chose my own dignity over keeping peace. I chose to value myself as much as I've always valued other people. How does it feel? I thought about his question for a moment, trying to identify the emotions swirling around in my chest. Scary, I said finally. And liberating, and sad, and empowering. It feels like I've finally grown up, finally stopped waiting for my mother to become the person I needed her to be, and accepted that she's exactly who she's shown herself to be. We stood there in comfortable silence, as the last light faded from the sky, holding each other while the sounds of our neighborhood settled into evening quiet. Somewhere in San Antonio, my mother was probably making frantic phone calls, trying to find someone else who could help her navigate Bob's mother's medical crisis. Somewhere in the distance, Bob's family was learning that actions have consequences, that you can't exclude people from your life, and then expect them to save you when you need them. But here, on our deck, in our home, in our life that we had built on principles of mutual respect and genuine partnership, everything felt exactly as it should be. What if she calls back? Michael asked eventually. She will, I said with certainty. When Bob's mother's condition gets worse, when the hospital waiting lists prove too long, when they realize that they don't have the connections or influence to fast-track her care, she'll call again. She'll probably try a different approach, maybe have Bob call directly, or get Emma and Jake to reach out with emotional appeals about how much their grandmother means to them. And when that happens, I'll remind whoever calls that Linda Chen Martinez made a deliberate choice to exclude her own daughter from her wedding in
favor of people she had known for less than a year. I'll explain that she chose Bob's family over her own blood, chose their comfort over my feelings, chose to build her happiness on the foundation of my erasure, and I'll tell them that choices have consequences, even when those consequences are inconvenient. Michael turned me around in his arms so I was facing him, his eyes serious in the dim light from our porch lamp. Are you sure about this? Because once we fully commit to this decision, there's probably no going back. Your relationship with your mother will be over, really over in ways that might be permanent. I looked into his face, this man who had never once made me question my worth, who had built his life around supporting my dreams and celebrating my successes. I thought about the family we were planning to create together, the children we would raise to understand that love was about showing up, about inclusion, about making the people you care about feel valued and important. I'm sure, I said quietly. The relationship I thought I had with my mother was already over. It died the moment she decided that Bob's children were more worthy of her maternal love than I was. What I'm doing now is just refusing to pretend that the corpse is still breathing. Okay then, he kissed my forehead gently. Whatever you decide, I'm with you. Whatever consequences come from this choice, we'll face them together. Your mother taught you a lot of things over the years, but she never taught you how to value yourself. I'm proud of you for learning that lesson on your own. The next morning brought exactly what I had predicted, a phone call from Bob himself. I was getting ready for work when my phone rang, and I almost didn't answer when I saw the unfamiliar San Antonio number. But curiosity got the better of me, and I picked up on the fourth ring. Sarah, this is Bob Martinez, your mother's husband. His voice was strained, exhausted in the way that comes from spending long hours in hospital waiting rooms. I think Linda explained to you about my mother's situation. She did. I kept my voice neutral, professional, giving him nothing to work with emotionally. I want you to know that I had nothing to do with the decision not to invite you to our wedding. That was entirely Linda's choice, and I didn't even know about it until after the fact. If I had known, I would have insisted that you be included. It was a good opening gambit, I had to admit. Throw Linda under the bus, position himself as the innocent bystander, who would have done the right thing if only he had known. But it was also obviously calculated, designed to make me feel like he was on my side,
like helping his mother would be a way of punishing Linda rather than enabling her. Bob, I appreciate you calling, but my decision isn't based on whether you personally were involved in excluding me from the wedding. My decision is based on the fact that Linda chose your family over her own daughter, and I'm not interested in helping that family now that it's convenient for her. But my mother had nothing to do with any of that, he said quickly. She's just an 82-year-old woman who needs medical care. She doesn't even know about the wedding situation, doesn't know anything about the problems between you and Linda. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of mistakes that other people made. You're absolutely right. I agreed. She doesn't deserve to suffer because of mistakes that other people made. But she also doesn't deserve special treatment because she happens to be related to someone who hurt me. Your mother has access to the same medical system as every other cardiac patient in Texas. She can get excellent care through proper channels. But it could take weeks to get her into the right program, and she doesn't have weeks. The doctors are saying that every day we delay increases the risk of another massive heart attack that could kill her. I felt a familiar tug of guilt, the instinctive desire to help someone in need regardless of the personal cost. But I pushed it down, reminding myself that this man's family had been deemed more important than me just days earlier. His mother had been welcomed into Linda's new family while I had been systematically excluded from it. That's terrible, I said sincerely. I hope you're able to find the medical connections you need to help her. But those connections won't be coming from me or my husband. Sarah, please. I know you have every right to be angry with Linda, but this isn't about her. This is about an innocent woman who could die while we're waiting for bureaucracy to work itself out. It's not about Linda. I corrected him. It's about me finally learning to value myself enough to refuse to be used by people who have already proven that I don't matter to them. Your mother may be innocent in the wedding situation, but she's also part of the family that was more important to Linda than her own daughter. I'm not going to use my husband's medical practice to save people who represent everything my mother chose over me. What if we could make this right somehow? What if Linda publicly apologized, admitted that she was wrong, made it clear to everyone that she made a terrible mistake? And then what? I asked. After your mother is saved, and the crisis is over, Linda goes back to her life in San Antonio with you and your children, and I go back to being an obligation she calls once a week out of duty. The only reason she would apologize publicly is to get what she needs from me. Once she has it, things would go right back to the way they were. Maybe not. Maybe this crisis would be a wake-up call for her, a chance for her to realize how much she's hurt you and commit to doing better. Bob, your wife spent months planning an elaborate wedding while deliberately lying to me about it. She chose your children over her own daughter not in a moment of emotion or crisis, but through calculated, sustained deception. That's not the kind of mistake someone makes accidentally. That's who she is. He was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear hospital sounds in the background, the beeping of monitors, and the soft conversations of medical staff. So there's nothing I can say that would change your mind. Nothing that would convince you to help us. Nothing. My answer was immediate and certain, because even if you convinced me to help you this time, what happens the next time Linda needs something from me? What happens when you and your children need connections or resources or favors that my husband and I could provide? Do I become the family emergency contact, the person Linda calls when she needs something but ignores when she doesn't? It wouldn't be like that. It would be exactly like that, because that's already how she treats me. I've been her emergency contact for emotional support, financial assistance, and practical help for years, while she's been building her real family with you and your children. I'm done being useful to people who don't value me. My mother could die because of this decision. The words hung in the air like an accusation, designed to make me feel responsible for whatever happened to a woman I had never met. But I had spent enough years taking responsibility for other people's emotions and consequences to recognize manipulation when I heard it. Your mother could die because she had a massive heart attack, not because I refused to use my personal connections to fast-track her medical care. I corrected him firmly. Her medical condition is a tragedy, but it's not my responsibility to fix it, especially not when helping her would mean enabling the people who deliberately excluded me from their family. I don't understand how you can be so cold about this. I'm not being cold. I'm being clear about boundaries that should have been respected a long time ago. Your wife taught me that blood doesn't make you family, that some relationships are purely transactional, and that some people will only value you when they need something from you. I'm simply applying those lessons to this situation. Sarah, please. I'm begging you. Put aside everything else, and just think about an 82-year-old woman who needs help. I am thinking about her. I said quietly. I'm thinking about the fact that she raised children who were welcomed into my mother's new family while I was erased from it. I'm thinking about the fact that she has grandchildren who got to stand beside my mother at her wedding while I found out about it through social media. I'm thinking about the fact that saving her life would benefit the exact people who proved that I don't matter to them. So that's it, your final answer. That's it. My mother made choices about what family meant to her. And now your family gets to live with those choices. I hope you find the medical help your mother needs, but it won't be coming from me. I hung up before he could respond. My hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline of holding firm against emotional manipulation that was expertly crafted to break down my defenses. Bob was clearly a skilled negotiator, probably successful in his real estate business precisely because he knew how to find people's pressure points and exploit them. But I was no longer the person who could be guilted into sacrificing her own well-being for other people's convenience. Linda had inadvertently taught me that some relationships weren't worth preserving, that some people would only drain your emotional resources without ever giving anything back, that some families were too toxic to maintain. The calls continued over the next few days, each one more desperate than the last. Emma called crying, explaining how much her grandmother meant to her, and begging me to understand that this wasn't about the wedding drama. Jake sent a long text message, detailing his grandmother's medical history and the urgency of her situation. Even David called from California, having been contacted by Linda and asked to intervene on her behalf. Each conversation was the same. Emotional appeals designed to make me feel responsible for a situation I hadn't created. Guilt trips intended to override my rational understanding of what was really happening. Desperate attempts to manipulate me into providing resources to people who had already proven I didn't matter to them. And each time my answer was the same. Linda had made choices about what family meant to her. And now she and her chosen family would live with the consequences of those choices. The breakthrough came on Friday evening, exactly 1 week after my original discovery of the wedding photos. Michael and I were having dinner at our favorite restaurant in downtown Austin, celebrating his successful negotiation of a new contract with 3 hospitals in East Texas, when my phone rang with another unfamiliar San Antonio number. This time it wasn't Bob or Emma or Jake. It was a woman I didn't recognize, her voice professional and slightly nervous. "Is this Sarah Chen? This is Dr. Patricia Hernandez, from University Hospital in San Antonio. I'm calling about Elena Martinez, who I understand is related to your family." I felt Michael's eyes on me as I processed what was happening. Bob's mother was apparently in such dire straits that they had convinced her doctor to call me directly, to make a professional appeal for medical assistance. "Hernandez, I appreciate you calling, but I need to stop you right there. Elena Martinez is not related to my family. She's the mother of my mother's husband, which makes her a stranger to me. Whatever medical assistance you're looking for needs to come through proper channels, not through personal connections. I understand this is an unusual situation," she said carefully. "But Mrs. Martinez's condition is deteriorating rapidly. We've been trying to get her into programs in Houston and Dallas, but the waiting lists are extensive, and frankly she may not survive long enough for a spot to open up. Your husband's reputation in the cardiac surgery community is exceptional, and we were hoping he might be able to make some calls, perhaps expedite her case. Dr. Hernandez, my husband built advanced cardiac solutions specifically to provide excellent cardiac care to underserved communities. He's passionate about ensuring that patients get the care they need, regardless of their connections or ability to influence the system. What you're asking me to do goes against everything he's worked to build. But surely in a life or death situation, exceptions can be made. Exceptions are made every day, for patients whose families have exhausted all proper channels and still need help. But those exceptions aren't made for people who happen to be related to someone who knows someone with influence. They're made based on medical need, and the failure of the system to respond appropriately. Mrs. Martinez's family has exhausted all proper channels. In less than a week, I let my skepticism show in my voice. "Dr. Hernandez, I understand that you're trying to help your patient, and I respect that. But what you're really asking me to do is use my personal relationship with a prominent cardiac surgeon to cut in line ahead of other patients who are also waiting for life-saving care." She was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear her realizing that her approach wasn't working. "Miss Chen, I have to be honest with you. Mrs. Martinez's family has been very persistent in their requests for me to make this call. They've made it clear that they believe you have the ability to help, and are choosing not to do so. They're absolutely right, I said calmly. I do have the ability to help, and I am choosing not to do so. Because the same family that's now asking for my help deliberately excluded me from their wedding celebration less than 2 weeks ago. Because they've made it clear that I only matter to them when they need something from me. I see. Her voice was different now, understanding dawning. I wasn't aware of the family dynamics involved in this situation. Now you are. Dr. Hernandez, I hope you're able to find the medical resources Mrs. Martinez needs. But those resources won't be coming from me or my husband, and I'd appreciate it if you'd make that clear to her family, so they can focus their energy on other options. I understand. And Miss Chen, for what it's worth, I think you're making the right decision. Medical care should be about need, not connections. I hung up feeling lighter than I had in days. Even a stranger, a doctor who had been pressured into making an uncomfortable phone call, could understand that what my mother's family was asking for was inappropriate and manipulative. That weekend, the calls finally stopped. I assumed that meant either Bob's mother had found the medical care she needed through proper channels, or her condition had deteriorated beyond the point where surgical intervention was possible. Either way, my phone remained blissfully quiet for the first time in a week. On Sunday evening, as Michael and I were preparing for another busy week, I finally got the closure I hadn't realized I was looking for. My phone buzzed with a text message from David, brief and to the point. Elena Martinez passed away this afternoon. Thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long moment, waiting to feel something that never came. Guilt maybe, regret for not helping when I could have, sadness for a woman I had never met, but whose life might have been saved if I had made different choices. But all I felt was a quiet sense of peace. Bob's mother had died from the same heart condition that killed thousands of people every year. People who didn't have connections or influence or family members with medical practices. Her death was a tragedy for the people who loved her, but it wasn't my responsibility. Wasn't my fault. Wasn't something I could have prevented without sacrificing my own dignity and self-worth. Everything okay? Michael asked, looking up from his medical journals. Elena Martinez died. I showed him David's text message. Bob's mother. He set down his journal and looked at me carefully, searching my face for signs of regret or second-guessing. How do you feel about that? Sad for their loss, I said honestly, but not guilty about my decision. She died because she had a massive heart attack and couldn't get the medical care she needed in time. That's a failure of the healthcare system, not a consequence of my choices. Any regrets? I thought about his question seriously, examining my heart for any lingering doubts about the path I had chosen. None. If I had helped them, if I had asked you to use your connections to save her life, it would have sent the message that Linda could treat me however she wanted as long as she could manufacture a crisis that required my assistance. It would have taught Bob's family that excluding me from their lives was acceptable as long as they could manipulate me into helping them when they needed it. And now they know that actions have consequences. Now they understand that you can't build your happiness on someone else's erasure and then expect that person to save you. Now Linda knows that the daughter she threw away is actually gone. Really gone. In ways that are permanent and irreversible. Michael reached over and took my hand, squeezing it gently. I'm proud of you. I know that couldn't have been easy, holding firm against that kind of emotional manipulation. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. I admit it, but it was also the most important. For the first time in my life, I chose my own well-being over someone else's crisis. I valued myself enough to refuse to be used by people who had already proven I didn't matter to them. What happens now? I looked around our living room, this space we had created together, that reflected our shared values and mutual respect and genuine partnership. Now we live our lives. We expand the practice. We travel. We start our own family. We create something based on love instead of obligation, respect instead of manipulation, genuine care instead of transactional relationships. And Linda gets to live with the choices she made. She chose Bob's family over her own daughter. Chose comfort over integrity. Chose the easy path over doing what was right. Now she knows what it costs to treat people that way. Now she understands that some relationships can't be repaired once they're broken, that some trust can't be rebuilt once it's destroyed. My phone buzzed with another text message, this one from Linda herself. I hope you're satisfied. Bob's mother is dead, and it's because you were too petty to help when it mattered. I showed the message to Michael, who read it with an expression of disgust. Even now she's blaming you instead of taking responsibility for her own choices. Even now I agreed. Which proves that I made the right decision. Someone who could send that message after everything that's happened is not someone who's capable of genuine remorse or change. She's exactly who she showed herself to be when she planned her wedding without me. I deleted the message without responding, blocking Linda's number so I wouldn't have to receive any more attempts at communication. The woman who had raised me, who had taught me about family and loyalty, and showing up for people you love, was gone. In her place was someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't want to know, someone whose presence in my life would only cause more pain and disappointment. But that was okay, because I had learned something valuable from her betrayal, that some relationships are too toxic to maintain, that some people will only value you when they need something from you, and that choosing your own dignity over other people's convenience is not selfish but necessary. I had finally grown up, finally stopped waiting for my mother to become the person I needed her to be, finally accepted that she was exactly who she had shown herself to be. And in that acceptance, I had found something I had been searching for my entire life. The peace that comes from valuing yourself enough to walk away from people who don't deserve your love. The next morning, I woke up in my beautiful home with my devoted husband beside me, ready to start another day in the life we had built together through mutual support and unwavering commitment to each other's happiness. Somewhere in San Antonio, Linda was probably dealing with the aftermath of her mother-in-law's death, and the realization that her own daughter was truly gone from her life. But that was her burden to carry, not mine. I had finally learned the difference between love and obligation, between family and people who share your DNA, between relationships worth fighting for, and relationships that are too broken to repair. I was free. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.